My dear people of God, today is a very special day because we celebrate two of the greatest heroes of our faith, St. Peter and St. Paul. And the timing of this is great because this week we had our vacation Bible school, and the theme was True North, teaching the kids that Jesus is the one who gives us direction in our life. Jesus is the one who leads us in the right way. Jesus is the one who gives us God's saving truth. And Peter and Paul were the two main people Jesus counted on to get that message out to the world in the early church. Now, I want to point out, I have a homily written here, but I really don't like it, so I'm not going to use it. I'm just using it as a guideline. I get a little too technical to help you understand part of the gospel. But what's most important to understand, where Peter and Paul were both martyred. And what's so important about that is both Peter and Paul had a deep, deep, deep love for Jesus. They didn't just believe in Jesus. They loved Jesus. So St. Peter, when he was being martyred for the faith, he asked to be crucified upside down because he didn't feel worthy to die the same way Jesus did. I mean, that's how much he loved him. He said, I'm not worthy to die the same way the Lord was. Crucify me upside down. Now, St. Paul is a little more complicated. Paul was first known as Saul the Pharisee. And as Saul the Pharisee, he hated the church. He was trying to destroy the church. Now, why was that? Well, Saul had a zeal for God. Now, at that point, his zeal was misdirected. And he hated the church because he thought the church was leading people away from the true God. He thought the church was leading people into falsehood. And then Jesus encountered him, and after that encounter with Jesus, everything changed. And so his zeal, he still was very zealous, but now his zeal was directed toward Jesus. And he faced hardship after hardship after hardship out of love for Jesus. Now, before he had this conversion, Paul was well thought of in the Jewish community. After his conversion, he was hated by many. At one point, 40 guys made a vow that they weren't going to eat until they killed Paul. Well, those guys got pretty hungry because they didn't do it. But St. Paul, he was shipwrecked 3 different times as he went from town to town. He was scourged with a pillar on 5 different occasions. He was beaten with rods. He was stoned and left for dead. He was put in jail many, many, many times. But he wouldn't stop. Why? Because he loved Jesus. He didn't just believe in Jesus. He loved Jesus. And I think Peter and Paul are, first of all, a great inspiration for you and me. Sometimes we can go through the motions of our faith. Yeah, I believe in Jesus. Yeah, I believe he's Lord. Oh, yeah, I believe he revealed truth that will set us free. But we don't have sometimes this enthusiasm for Jesus. Just think of the enthusiasm of Peter. Think of the enthusiasm of Paul. Their deepest desire in life was to tell people about Jesus, to help people know the truth that would set us free, because they knew that Jesus was true north. They knew that Jesus is the one who gives direction in life. They knew that Jesus proclaimed truth would set us free. And so their love for Jesus, folks, should inspire you and me to love him. Not just believe in him, not just to pray sometimes, but to really love him. To ask ourselves day after day, Jesus, how can I give you glory today? Jesus, what do you want me to do for you today? Jesus, how can I honor you today? Because that's what Peter and Paul did throughout their lives. The second point I'd like to make for this feast has to do with the gift we heard in our gospel. Jesus gave us the gift of the papacy. Now, a lot of people want to reject that gift, but even our translation in today's gospel is a little confusing, because our translation said, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." Well, Peter and rock don't sound anything alike. Now, what I was going to do in my homily that I have typed out here that I'm not looking at was explain to you how we know what Jesus said to him. Jesus didn't speak Greek, which is what Matthew's gospel is written. He spoke a language called Aramaic. And we know that what Jesus said to him was, "You are Kepha," which is a word for rock, "and on this Kepha I will build my church." It would have been the same word in both places. Now, it gets a little muddy because Matthew wrote in Greek, and the word for rock in Greek is Petra, which is a feminine word. And so they can't call him Petra. Many of you might remember the song, A Boy Named Sue. Any of you remember that? At least back then, you couldn't give a boy a girl's name. Today, things are a little different. But back then, you couldn't give a boy. So they couldn't call it, so they masculinized it. So in the Greek, it says, you are Petros, and on this Petra, I will build my church. And based on that difference, people try to explain away the gift of the papacy. But just take my word. I'll post this online because we have a section about my homilies, and it explains how we know that the word that Jesus used was Kepha, which means rock. And he would have said, you are Kepha, and on this Kepha I will build my church. But a lot of people reject the gift of the papacy. Why? Because they don't want to believe that there's somebody with God-given authority. We believe that the Pope has God-given authority. Why wouldn't people not want to believe that? Because if you believe he has God-given authority, that means you've got to submit yourself to that authority. And a lot of people don't want to do that today. They want to decide for themselves what's right for me or what's wrong for me. What I'm going to believe or what I'm not going to believe. But folks, Jesus told us the truth will set us free. The truth will set us free. Now, so many people in our culture today believe the lies of Satan. They believe that God's truth is going to limit us. That God's truth is going to restrict us. That God's truth is going to keep us from having good times. That's a lie from the pit of hell. And so many people, though, they reject the authority of the Pope because they don't want to submit to that authority. But folks, Jesus gave us the gift of the papacy because he loves you and me. If the truth does set us free, which it does, Satan wants to keep us away from the truth. He wants to keep us confused. He wants us to keep us wandering in the darkness. He wants us following our whims and our desires rather than following his word. But the gift of the papacy is a reminder to us that Jesus has not abandoned us. He loves you and me. And he wants you and me to be set free by the truth. Now, sometimes the truth seems hard to embrace. Sometimes the truth seems like it's going to limit us. The way Jim Hogan puts it sometimes is from this point of in this world, sometimes hell looks heavenly to us, and sometimes heaven looks hellish to us. Because of this fallen human nature, we want to do things that are going to hurt ourselves and hurt others. But Jesus wants you and me to be set free. And so on this Feast of Peter and Paul, we have the wonderful opportunity to be inspired by two men who loved Jesus. Gave their lives for Jesus. Wanted to glorify Jesus. And we have the assurance from Jesus that the gates of hell will not prevail against his church because the one with the keys of the kingdom is going to be protected. So that you and I can know the truth that will set us free. Not just know some truth mixed with error, but know the truth that will set us free. And that's what this feast is about. Jesus loves you and me so much that he gives us the gift of the papacy to lead us and guide us. And we have the example of Peter and Paul who loved Jesus so much that they were willing to give everything for him. And that's all I got. So let's stand. I could have saved a lot of paper if I heard that. Our faith tells us that Jesus loves us enough to show us the truth. Let's now together profess that